Matt Painter gets his 500th win, and the Boilermakers look like they're in mid-season form.
You are Locked On Boilermakers, your daily podcast on the Purdue Boilermakers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Locked On Boilermakers here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Now, the number one sports podcast network. Thank you for joining us here today. I am your host. I am Nick Arvin. I'm the host of Locked On Boilermakers, and I write for Purdue 24/7. We've got an exciting episode coming your way today on this beautiful Monday because last night Purdue got a big victory over the Akron Zips, an Akron team that is very underrated. And with that, Matt Painter got his 500th career victory. Just another big milestone for that guy. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about domination on the glass. For the second game in a row, Purdue has really done good on the boards. We'll talk about that and finish it off, recapping what happened over the weekend with Purdue football facing off against Washington. Thank you guys once again for joining us, and let's go ahead and hop right into it. Let's talk about Purdue's 18-point victory over the Akron Zips. And the thing that we do have to talk about before we get into this game is that Akron, yes, they're not the best team in the nation. They come from the MAC. They are a mid-major, but in terms of mid-majors, Akron is probably going to be one of the better ones in the nation this year. Akron came into Mackey Arena as a top 80 team in KenPom. They were almost averaging 100 points per game. They were 3-0, undefeated on the year going into Mackey. So that was going to be a big matchup. Whether Purdue would be able to contain Akron after the highs of beating Alabama on the road. And quickly, Purdue, they struggled for a little bit to get hot and to limit Akron. Fletcher Loyer certainly kept Purdue in the game for a lot of the early portion when he was making threes all over the place. But ultimately, Purdue, they were eventually able to just flat out rebound Akron. They were able to get so many extra possessions that they had the advantage, and Purdue was just so efficient in this game. And you talk about having a point guard in Braden Smith where he controls the pace that you play with. We saw that tonight. Braden Smith was all over the place. 3 double-doubles in this game. It was the first time it happened since 1977, I believe was the stat. It was a fun night. A lot of guys packed the stat sheet in this one. But overall, you did what you need to do to succeed against a very high-powered offense, and they did against Akron. Yes, Akron isn't going to be as successful as maybe a team you're going to see in Big Ten play, a Michigan and Illinois. They're not that level. But in terms of playing a mid-major early in the season, playing a team to get you ready for those bigger games down the stretch, I think that Akron was a really good test. And overall, people can say what they want about how the Zips came in. Yes, Purdue, they outmatched them. Purdue was the better team throughout the course of this game, but I still thought that Akron was a good opponent. I thought for who they are, for being in the conference they are, they showed a decent amount of fight against the Boilermakers, but ultimately, Purdue was just too much. And we're really kind of getting to the point now where I feel like Purdue is getting into mid-season form, and it is still early. Purdue, they're headed to the Bahamas, Baha Mar, this following week. But these past 2 games, this week of games against Alabama, getting that big win on the road, and then not listening to that rat poison, so to speak, and staying pretty moderate, not having success hangover. I think they said on the broadcast, Rafi Davis said that. But it was relevant to what Purdue did today. They didn't get too high on their horse. They came into Mackey and they handled business. Akron, they played pretty good. They have a couple guys with Tavari Johnson. He had 20 points. He's good for them, a small guard, but he shot the ball pretty well. 7 for 16, not the most efficient, but like I said, 20 points. Amani Lyles, Purdue did a great job limiting him. He's a big man for Akron. He's a senior at 6'9", but usually he averages about 8 rebounds a game. We'll get to it here throughout the episode, but rebounds are almost non-existent for Akron in this game, and that's similar to what we saw against Alabama for this Purdue team. Purdue is really starting to hit their stride in that front court. And they're really starting to hit their stride with those rebounding numbers. And that comes back to Oscar Cluff. That comes back to TKR. But I feel like whenever TKR is in the lineup specifically, because we were without him the first 2 games of the year, and we saw how kind of stagnant that offense was, how there wasn't as much production as you would have liked to seen. And that really kind of all culminated with Oakland, where you don't win that game as convincingly as you want to, but you bring back TKR, and he has 2 of the all-time performances that he's ever had in his first 2 games going into the season. TK against Alabama had an all-time game where it was like he was one of only 3 people since Tim Duncan to put up 15, 15, and 5 against a Power 5 or Power 4 now program. TK, he doubled down again in this game. He had a big one, another double-double. He was one of the 3 with the double-doubles. He had 17 points, 15 rebounds. He was very efficient, 7 for 10. When Trey Kaufman Renn is efficient, when he's rebounding the ball like he is, and when he's the competitor that he was tonight, that he was against Alabama, this team is going to be extremely hard to beat, because I feel like a lot of people didn't really account for how important Trey Kaufman Renn is to this team. They didn't look at that the first 2 games, and that's why a lot of people doubted Purdue. That's why Purdue, whether you like it or not, isn't ranked number 1 in the AP poll, and I completely disagree. They will be ranked number 1, but largely they're ranked number 2 right now because they were judged off of what they were without TKR. Now that they have TKR, I think there's no debate. Purdue is the number 1 team in the nation. That's what he provides. And I feel like it just goes to show, seeing this team without TKR and seeing that with TKR, it shows how much a difference maker this guy is for Purdue. I want to go over the other double digits, the other double-double guys. One of them was Braden Smith. Of course, it feels like Braden Smith always has big nights, but he had another 10-assist game tonight, 10 assists, 16 points. The efficiency is something that maybe we start to worry about, as he shot 4 for 12. Didn't have the best night shooting efficiently against Alabama either. But Braden Smith, he just does so many different things for you that even if he doesn't make that shot at the most consistent level, he's still going to make up for it, whether that be with his assist, pushing the pace. He's just so talented, and he always puts up big numbers. But the things that he does don't necessarily always show up on the stat sheet. But the last double-double of the night that I thought was extremely big, and a guy that we've been wanting to really produce was Oscar Cluff. I thought Oscar Cluff was incredible tonight. He had 14 rebounds to match with Trey Kaufman Renn's 15. He shot 7 for 9, 14 points. I want to see Oscar Cluff get aggressive, and a lot of it comes when he's able to get offensive rebounds. He had 8 tonight, and then a lot of those are second chance opportunities. But I feel like when Oscar Cluff is aggressive, he's efficient enough, he's good enough with that 7-foot wingspan to get a bucket down low. Obviously, Akron, they don't have the big men that you're going to see later on in the season, but Oscar Cluff, his ability to dominate down low, his ability to get a double-double, and for all 3 of those guys to have double-doubles. Like I said, it was the first time since like the 70s that 3 people have had a double-double at Purdue. It was a really fun night. It was a fun victory. And it was Matt Painter's 500th victory. Yes, the accolades just continue to push and push and grow for Matt Painter. The only thing that's missing for this guy is a national championship. He's already amongst the greats. He's amongst the greats in the Big Ten. He will be in the Hall of Fame one day. But like I said, all that's missing is that national championship. And after seeing Purdue play tonight, after seeing Purdue play against Alabama, it seems like, honestly, he may not be that far away, because this team, they hit their stride. It seems like Purdue is in midseason form. You got 4 wins in a row under your belt. And I think this team just continues to get hotter. I will talk all week about Baha Mar, Purdue traveling to the Bahamas. It's going to be a fun one. It's going to be a big test, but I'm so impressed with how Purdue played tonight. Last night, when this episode comes out, they played really good basketball. And great that Matt Painter got his 500th career win. I want to hit a little bit more on the rebounding, dig a little bit deeper into how Purdue was able to win this game and how they were able to win it pretty dominating, in my opinion. We'll have that here next on Locked On Boilermakers. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a much bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head on over to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Akron just narrowly covered the 18.5-point spread set by our friends over at FanDuel. However, although Purdue didn't cover, I felt like they won pretty convincingly against Akron. I felt like they had a very good game. And I feel like a lot of the reason why the takeaway is that Purdue was successful against Akron was because of the rebounding numbers. And this wasn't just a tonight thing. This was also back to last week, last Thursday against Alabama. They won the rebounding margin against the Tide by 24 rebounds. Tonight, much of the same, out rebounding Akron by 19. That was the difference in this one. We can go back to it. Trey Kaufman Renn had 15. Oscar Cluff had 14. Braden Smith had 3. Omer Meyer had 4. Just a lot of great rebounding tonight for the Boilermakers. And that's been something that, looking back to the first 2 games, I hate to keep bringing them up because they really aren't relevant when you don't have TKR. But that was a question mark. I think, tied in the rebounding against Oakland, you have to be better than that going into Alabama. That was the conversation. And so far, Purdue, they look like they might be the best rebounding team in the nation. Tonight, like I said, they out-rebounded Akron, the Zips, by a lot, 45-26. Offensively, it was 19-12. Defensively, 26-14. And then where the numbers really get you are the points in the paint. And yes, this is more relevant than just rebounds because there is more that goes into this. TKR getting his little floater, but a lot of these points in the paint come from those second chance opportunities. Points in the paint, 46 for Purdue. For Akron, only 18. And a lot of those come from TKR. A lot of those come from Oscar Cluff. A lot of those come from being able to get inside, having trust that those bigs are going to be able to clog up the inside and let you get to the hoop. That was what Purdue set their eyes on tonight. They did shoot the ball okay from 39%, but they didn't shoot it at a very high volume. They knew going into this game that they had a physical advantage over to the Zips with Oscar Cluff with TK in the front court, and that's how they wanted to exploit this Zips team. This is a very high-scoring Akron team. This isn't going to be a team that you can just run over. You can't just go into a track meet with Akron and beat them. We saw that early in the game. Fletcher Loyer, yes, he was making threes, but Akron, they were making them just as well. So we knew that that wasn't going to be the way that you find success. The way that you find success against a team like this is beating them down low, just tiring out this team from repetitively getting the ball inside, rebounding the ball at a high level, and getting it done. And once again, Purdue did that. And I think if they're able to keep that identity throughout the course of this year, that's where they're going to be able to be the most successful. Because I think for this team specifically, a lot of it's going to come down to Braden Smith controlling the pace. My friend Craig Bowers from Boilers in the Stands, he tweeted out something where Purdue is it's so efficient. They're so efficient. It was like 1.5 points per possession, and Akron was a little bit under 1. That's unheard of, that you're able to average that many points per possession. And Braden Smith, he can control the pace in terms of how fast you score, when you score. When you're able to do that, you're almost unbeatable. Factor in being able to control the possessions that you have whenever you're able to get offensive rebounds. You're not able to beat a team like that. That's just, you're not able to beat them. And I'm not saying that Purdue is going to go undefeated this year, because eventually Purdue isn't going to play at this level and they're going to get beat. But you can look at the 18-point difference in this game and you can say, well, other teams in the nation, they're beating teams by way more. But you can't look at that. You have to look at how Purdue wins these games. It was very similar to how they did it tonight against how they did it against Alabama. I don't think that these Boilermakers, they're going to make a living out of blowing teams out. what I think they're going to do is that they're going to make a living out of winning games. It doesn't matter by how much, because when you're able to rebound the ball alongside with maintaining the pace that you want to play at and being as efficient as this Purdue team has been so far this year, it's hard to beat. Alabama saw that. Akron saw that tonight. And I don't know who's going to beat this Purdue team when they play as high of a level as they did tonight. That's truly how well they played. Yes, they weren't perfect. And you can look at kind of how Akron started out. Purdue, they struggled a little bit to start this game out. They turned the ball over 13 times. It wasn't perfect. But when you do those three things, when you control the pace, when you're efficient, and when you rebound the ball, offensively, nobody can really beat you. They have to beat you on the other side. And for Purdue, you're willing to do that. You're willing to have faith in your offense that they're going to be able to win you games, because ultimately Purdue has the number one offense in the nation, according to Ken Pom, according to AP, according to everybody. Purdue has the number one team in the nation, and it's pretty evident when they're scoring the way that they did tonight. Almost cracked 100 in this game. They did crack 97. I want to talk about Meyer before we transition over to football. I thought that Meyer was very good, to be honest. This was the first game where I felt like he was really, really confident in terms of operating that offense. And I feel like the reason that he was so confident was because he played alongside Braden Smith a lot, where he could either be with the ball, he could run the offense if Braden needed a break, or he could be off the ball and wait for Braden Smith to generate him a look. But Meyer's going to be very special. He's going to be very important the rest of this year, because anytime that Braden Smith is out, that's going to be the guy that operates the offense. He's going to be the primary point guard when Braden Smith isn't on the floor. And going into the future, you want this guy to be kind of a building stone for the next era of Boilermaker basketball. And like I said, today, I thought he was pretty good. He shot 5 for 10 from the field. He had 14 points in this game, 6 assists, 4 rebounds. He did turn the ball over 3 times, so he can be a little bit better about that. But in 23 minutes, I don't know for sure, but I do think that's the most amount of minutes that he's played so far this year. I was really impressed with Meyer. And like I said, that's going to be a guy that I think is really going to need to improve this year going into the future. I'm not saying that he's not totally there, but definitely a raw talent. And we can see that as he's gotten to Purdue, where this guy has plenty of talent, but just needs to get into that college kind of landscape where he hasn't played before. It'll take time, but he's seemingly getting there, and we can see that tonight. Daniel Jacobsen, I don't think we talked about. 9 points, 4 for 5. He made a 3. Still not rebounding the ball, but that's not really what you need him for. I like the lineup where TKR and Jacobsen are on the floor together, because TK, he could rebound the ball. It kind of makes up for it. And Jacobsen, if he can make threes at 7'4", once again, just another crazy thing that Purdue has, an embarrassment of riches. Purdue is so good this year. Daniel Jacobsen, just another part of that. Jakari Harris, still trying to get into the flow, get more comfortable. He only shot it 3 times tonight, 6 points. And CJ Cox, he did his thing. He hasn't really been producing on the offensive side of the ball at a crazy level, but what CJ Cox offers you, being able to guard against the opposing offense. And we saw that tonight. Obviously, for Akron, they did have Tavari Johnson go for 20 points, but they have several guys that are really good. Evan Mahavi, he's a senior for Akron. CJ Cox was on him a lot. He's a starter for the Zips, kind of plays off the wing at times. But CJ Cox was on him, and he was pretty limited in this game. Only had 12 points in 25 minutes. CJ Cox, he makes his impact. It may just not show on the box score tonight. But ultimately, Purdue, they were successful. They continue to win these games, and they continue to be pretty dominant, especially in the last 2, in my opinion, especially in terms of those rebounding numbers. A 43 differential over the past 2 games, averaging beating other teams by over 20 rebounds a game. That's pretty unheard of. And like I said, the upside for this Purdue team in terms of rebounding the ball, I think we're just now starting to realize this, where maybe you have 2 of the best rebounders in the country. I don't know if we were going to say that about TKR going into this season, but you bring in Oscar Cluff, who was the best rebounder last year. And TK, I mean, he had 15 in game 1 against Alabama, 15 in his second game against Akron. He's averaging 15 rebounds on the season. And it's tough for me to say, yes, it's a small sample size, but that this guy is not a top rebounder in the nation. I think that this Purdue team is very special. I think that they have a ton of talent. And I think that if they're able to rebound the ball at the level that they have been doing the past 2 games, they're going to be a very difficult team to compete with. But we'll talk about a team that's not as difficult to compete with here next, and that is the Purdue football team. They've only got 1 game left in the season and 1 more chance to win that conference win that they haven't gotten in quite a while. They lost to Washington, and we'll talk about that here next. College football and basketball are back, and I couldn't be more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands. Well, there's just nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel more like a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, and prices jumping at the checkout. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices. With no surprise fees, what you see is what you pay. And I love using Game Time because I can get tickets to Ross Aid or to Mackey, and I can get them at a pretty affordable price and a very convenient access. And that's why I use Game Time. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets or basketball tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket. Go download Game Time today. If you guys have made it this far, I really appreciate it. I hope you guys stick to the end. But we have talked about soon to be the number 1 rated Boilermakers. They'll be ranked number 1 later today. But I want to transition over to the not so high ranked Purdue football team because I know one of the more embarrassing losses this weekend, but I do want to talk about it. I want to talk it all over, see where we're at surrounding this whole situation. So we had Roman from Locked On Washington on the show earlier last week to kind of preview this game, talk what Washington wants to do. And I feel like a lot of people at home, Purdue fans, Washington fans, etc., everybody knows about Jonah Coleman, the running back who, I mean, he's electric. That's all there is to it. He's been doing it for quite a while. He wasn't 100%. He didn't play in this game for Washington. Washington, in fact, had like 3 or 4 different offensive starters out in this game, but I mean, you couldn't tell. They put up 49 points on the Boilermakers, and ultimately they just found so much success. They really dominated both sides of the line of scrimmage everywhere. Washington was really kind of all over the place in this game. Like I said, for Washington, they just exposed Purdue's defense all day long, and there needs to be some answers going into the next year. This secondary definitely needs to be addressed in the portal. They tried to address it this year in the portal with Grimes, Taj Rael, who's been pretty good. He's been a bright spot, but there just haven't been enough guys to compete at a Big Ten level, and that's been kind of the thing this year for Purdue on both sides of the ball, just not having enough pieces to succeed against teams like this, and that certainly was on display. Antonio Harris for Purdue, I mean, he had 10 carries, wasn't his best. I wanted to see him produce against Washington. But he wasn't able to do that. He only averaged 2.3 yards per carry, 23 yards on 10 carries. The quarterback situation was a mess. Ryan Brown was out there to start 1 for 6 for 17 yards. He looks like he's completely lost it out there. And I was really high on Ryan Brown to start the year. And I gave Ryan Brown a lot of leeway, even going into, Minnesota, where that game got lost. Just unacceptable. Really kind of what's happened this year. I thought that Ryan Brown had all the tools to kind of be a guy that you can trust going into the future, that maybe he could be the leader of this program going into the future. And now I feel like there's kind of a question mark about that. Whereas Malachi Singleton, he plays in, I feel like a lot of it kind of comes down to Indiana, where those are the decisions that need to be made against Indiana. Who plays at quarterback? Who plays where else? Because the transfer portal, it's not very far away. And I'm not under the impression that a ton of people are going to be staying this year because Purdue, they went 2-10. You graduate quite a few guys. And I'm sure some people will stay, but I don't think that everyone's going to be as bought in on Barry Odom as they were to start out this year because, like I said, he went 2-10. And next year, there needs to be a bounce back because it's unacceptable. You can't go 2 years in a row of losing football like this. And right now, for 1-11 last year, looking at 2-10 this year, it's not good. It's unacceptable, and something needs to change. And then looking into Indiana, I mean, that's going to be a big one. You got beat by 60 last year. It was embarrassing to get beat like that. You're at home at Ross-Ade. There are going to be a ton of people there on Black Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, tons of families doing the double. I'm doing the double that day with Eastern Illinois and Purdue, and then following that one up with the night game against Indiana. That's where your eyes shift to if you're a Purdue football fan. This hasn't gone your way this season, and there are a ton of question marks all over the ball. But against Indiana, I mean, I'm not expecting a Purdue win, but I just don't want them to get embarrassed. No matter what, don't get embarrassed. And I know that's kind of a high task to ask when you're playing off against an Indiana team the way that they are this year. Number 2, arguably the number 1 team in the nation, undefeated with Cignetti. They have a potential Heisman and Mendoza. I mean, there's so many pieces for Indiana, and I don't want to look past this Washington game, but ultimately, Purdue, they just got dominated. That's really as far as it goes. We don't have any solutions to a lot of positions on the field. The running game wasn't going. They couldn't get anything going in the passing game. Defensively, they were sliced through. Desmond Williams threw for 257 yards, only missed 3 passes. Just not anything went well for you against Washington, and you have to find some way to regroup. If you're Barry Odom, I'm not asking you for a win, but go into the offseason with something positive. Find some way to be competitive against Indiana, whether that's the Hoosiers going into Ross-Ade and thinking, hey, these are Purdue that we beat by 60 last year. This is going to be a cakewalk. We can beat them. I still think that this Purdue team was more competitive throughout a lot of points at this year. Yes, this week was not pretty, and I think it was one of Purdue's worst weeks of the season. But I still think that Purdue has shown a lot more fight throughout this year, albeit losing what's likely to be 10 straight. I want to see some type of competitiveness against Indiana. Anything else is unacceptable because you can't have what you had last year. It was embarrassing, and it's not okay. Something needs to change for this Purdue football program. A lot of that needs to be addressed in the portal, but I don't know if that's going to be enough. You need some certainty at this quarterback position. You need an answer, whether that's Singleton, whether that's Brown. You got to trust Barry Odom, but find your guy because having to bounce back and forth between Singleton, Brown, never knowing who's going to be the future and likely having one of these guys transfer out, it's not a good formula for building a successful football program going into the future. You can't win games if you don't have a competent football team, and you can't have a competent football team if you don't have a competent quarterback. Everybody knows the old John Madden saying about 2 quarterbacks is the same as none. Right now, Purdue has 2 quarterbacks, and neither of them are all that good. Just being honest. They really aren't. But you got to have faith. These guys are really young. It's a different era of college football. And if you trust in Barry Odom, if you trust in why Babinski brought him over last year, it's that he can develop a quarterback. It's that he can develop a team into playing a brand of winning football. He wasn't able to do it in year 1, but going into this week against Indiana, you got to build on something. Going into the portal, you got to find something, and you got to develop one of these guys into being the face of this program. If not, Purdue football is not looking to be in a great spot. And it's just a shame because Purdue football, the program's better when Purdue football is good. And it's a shame that it isn't right now. But I appreciate you guys joining me. Thank you for joining me on this Monday. Big couple wins over the weekend. Alabama on Thursday, obviously, but Akron last night, it was a huge one. Thank you for making Locked On Boilermakers your first listen today. For your second listen, consider checking out Locked On Big Ten. Craig Sheeman does that one. He breaks down the most exciting conference in college sports, from the rivalries to the championships and every game in between. Find Locked On Big Ten on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Of course, that is your team every day. Thank you, guys. And as always, boiler up, hammer down.